Got 10 matching. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Fill in the blank. 7 true and false. I have 2 2-point long answers and 2 3-point long answers that we'll kind of talk about. The review at the bottom, you can see what might be some short answer questions. Okay. All right. So at the top, interstate compacts. Now, your vocab for this, there were 18 words in your vocab. So you guys have that file somewhere. You can check it. It's be something good to look over for this test. Interstate compacts is not something I have in the notes. Okay. So interstate compacts. I mean, what do you think? I mean, does that sound like something like agreements between states? That kind of what that sounds like? Agreements between states would be an interstate compact. Okay. Everybody got the review sheet? Can't find it? Need to print one for myself. Anybody else need one? Right that. All right, revenue sharing. What do we call that? Crack? Federal tax dollars shared with state and local governments. Okay. Revenue sharing. Well, guys, this is no strings attached. Remember, this is just at the beginning in the 1970s where they just said, hey, we have some extra money, we're going to send it back to you, right? This is what kind of got states hooked on the money. Just like, here, take it, enjoy it, like it, become dependent on it, okay? Extradition. Okay, that comes really on the last slide of the notes. Okay, when we talked about privileges and immunities, get there. And one more. I go too fast. There we go. Okay. I don't even have it up here. You guys have it on your homework, I think. It's privileges and immunities. So if you flee the state, okay, and you're wanted for a crime, okay, you have to be extradited back to the state. Okay, so it's the process of transferring somebody that's wanted for a crime from one state back to another state where they are wanted for that crime. That's extradition. Concurrent powers, right here. Powers held by national government and state governments at the same time. Examples of concurrent powers. Are there state taxes? State income tax? Yep. Are there federal income taxes? The taxes would be a concurrent power. Local law enforcement, we have state local law enforcement, and we have federal law enforcement, which would be like the FBI, U.S. Marshals, U.S. Border Patrol, federal law enforcement. Okay, so those are examples. Court systems, we have federal courts, we have state, we have local courts. Those are all concurrent powers. Okay, not sure if I went over this with you guys or not, but when you talk about in Article 4 of the Constitution, which is about states, okay, before Kansas was a state, it was a what? It was a territory, okay? And as you guys know, we started with 13 states. Now we have 50. So most of those that became states were territories first, okay? You have to have 60,000 people living in that territory, okay? Enabling Act would be where the U.S. government allows a territory to apply to become a state, to request to become a state. They got to meet certain guidelines. Like 60,000 population, and they have to have a representative constitution or a Republican form of government. Okay, so just like Kansas, guys, we get to elect our local leaders, we get to elect state leaders. We have that, then they give us an enabling act, and then if the federal government approves of this government and wants it to come in, they do what's called an act of admission, which basically means becomes a state. Okay. Now, one thing Democrats are likely to do if they get back in power in 2028 is pass an enabling act for the District of Columbia. Okay. For it to become the 51st state, and quite possibly an enabling act for Puerto Rico become the 52nd state. Okay, based on their populations, this is going to increase the number of members of people in the United States. And so those 435 House seats, DC will get one. Puerto Rico could get one, maybe two. Okay, so other states may lose those House seats and lose electoral college votes because of it. Democrats think this will favor them for sure in DC. That's 3 electoral college votes for the Democrats. DC is like 90% Democrats. Okay, people who live there. Puerto Rico, probably more Democrats than Republicans. So look for that in 2028. Okay, it could be a thing. All right, so you guys see active admission? It's a little bit further down on your list. So you could say when a territory becomes a state. Okay, in criminal laws. Laws that forbid certain actions and provide punishments for violations. Laws that forbid certain actions and provide punishment for violations. Inherent powers. right here, powers that have historically been recognized as naturally belonging to all governments that conduct business over a sovereign nation. Okay, these are natural powers that any government would have, be inherent. Okay, one of those powers is acquiring territory, like this. Acquiring territory is an inherent power, as is controlling your border. So immigration, guys, is a federal power, not a state and local power. Okay, states cannot enforce immigration laws. It's an inherent power that belongs to a national government. We've had some court cases over this recently, okay, where states were trying to help the federal government and they got sued. And the courts have said states cannot do this. Okay, so generally when you're talking about local law enforcement, Wichita Police Department, they're not supposed to ask you if they pull you over, are you a citizen? Okay, now if you get arrested, they may find out that you're not a citizen. Does that make sense? Okay. Depending on what state or city you're in, if you're arrested and you're in the country illegally, in Kansas, they're going to let the federal authorities know that they have you in their possession. In Chicago, they're not going to let the federal authorities know. In California, they're not going to let the federal authorities know. These are known as sanctuary cities or sanctuary states, where people that are in the country illegally have sanctuary. They will not report them to the federal government, even if they commit a crime. Okay. Okay. State powers. Now, when you think about state powers, remember the 10th Amendment. Remember the 10th Amendment. All powers not granted to the national government are reserved to the states, the people. Okay? So what kind of things do states typically do? They do things like licenses, driver's licenses, marriage licenses, tags for cars, titles for your cars, these sorts of things. Okay? State powers are reserve powers from the 10th Amendment. Civil laws. Okay, civil laws, laws that govern relationships between people. So if you sue somebody, it's a civil law, okay? Also, civil laws have to be recognized by other states. So Kansas has a law about marriage. You get married in Kansas. Your driver's license, they have a law, okay? Now, again, let's just talk about issues that are, hot right now. Is like some states will give driver's licenses. Actually, most states will give driver's license to people that are in the country illegally. Okay, or people with green cards, people that are in the country legally. They'll allow them to get driver's licenses. Okay, other states that don't offer those people driver's licenses have to recognize those driver's licenses. Okay, whether the person's a citizen or not, you have to recognize it because of this, the full faith and credit clause. Okay, insured, that's your extradition. Sorry about that. And then one state must recognize another state's official documents, and some of those referred to as civil laws. Elastic clause. Okay, this is in your homework, but it's in Article 4 of the Constitution. Okay. The elastic clause is known as the necessary and proper clause. Okay. So the nickname is the elastic clause. This is actually in Article 1, Section 8. Make all laws necessary for carrying out its constitutional powers. Okay, that stretches the power of the national government. Okay, you talk about things like the Interstate Commerce Clause, which is in the Constitution. It stretches the power of the government to regulate all sorts of different things. Block grants. Okay, key word here. Okay, we started with revenue sharing, okay, at the beginning, which we talked about was what got states addicted. And then they changed the name from revenue sharing to grants. And there's a couple different types of grants. These are block grants. Funds that can be used in a broadly defined area. States tend to like these because it gives them more flexibility. Okay, so when you see the word broadly or broad, think block. Block, broad. Okay, big chunk of money that has to be used in a certain area. Okay, welfare, health, education, that could be a lot of different things. Okay, public transportation could be a lot of different things. You don't have to specifically use it for, say, airports or city buses. Okay, because not all towns and cities have buses. So, say, public transportation, rail, airports, okay, buses, block grants. Okay, active admission is the process of making territory a state. Express powers. Yeah, you guys know what the word express means. It's very clear. Okay, these are powers that are found in the Constitution. Constitution listing powers granted to the national government. These are expressed. They're concrete. They're right there. They're in writing. Writing. Whereas inherent powers and implied powers, not generally in the Constitution, where express powers are in the Constitution. So inherent, all governments do that. Okay? We'll talk about implied here in a minute. Categorical grants. Okay? These are grants that are given to states for very specific purposes. Very specific purposes. So states don't like these as much because the federal government is directing where this money goes. Airports, okay, prisons. And generally, guys, you have to match that money. Natural disaster aid is a very good example of a categorical grant. Used for a very specific purpose, categorical. You guys understand the difference between categorical and block grants? Reserve powers. Again, here, okay, like states, this is reserved to the states, belong to states because the Constitution neither delegates these powers to the national government nor prohibits them to the states. That's really the 10th Amendment right there. Okay. This is basically what the 10th Amendment says. So it reinforces this idea of federalism, this division, sharing national, state, and local government power. And then full faith credit clause is down here as well. Okay. If somebody flees a state, you have extradition to bring them back. You can't just take them back. Okay. And then one state must recognize another state's official documents, like driver's licenses, marriage licenses, death certificates, contracts, civil laws. Many civil laws will be included in that. Okay, mandates, federal mandates. Definition here. There we go. Laws directing states to take action on an issue are federal mandates. You guys know what it means to mandate something, okay? I do not mandate you to turn this review sheet in tomorrow morning, but it will benefit you with 5 points if you do. If I mandated it and you didn't turn it in, you'd get a 0. Yes? Okay, federal courts. These were established by Congress, except for the Supreme Court. But their job is to play referee. Federal courts settle disputes. Okay? Generally between states, but they also settle disputes within our government. That is the role of federal courts. To play umpire or referee. Then, of course, what are laboratories of democracy? Sometimes laboratories of democracy, states are seen as laboratories of democracy because you can do what? You can experiment on different solutions to a problem. Okay, I listened to, told you guys I was on a podcast the other day. That same podcast, they interviewed Lily Wu, the mayor of Wichita. Went about an hour and 10 minutes. I listened to that yesterday on a walk. And she talked about how the city has allocated $30 million to build a homeless shelter that will also contain some low-cost housing and offices for third-party groups that are nonprofits, could be churches and nonprofits, to help minister to the homeless in Wichita. So it'll be a homeless shelter. People can get food, and then if they get back on their feet, they can rent a place there and hopefully get back on their feet altogether and move on and be in a good place after that. So that is conducting an experiment to try and help homeless in our region. If the federal government decided what the homeless policy was for all 50 states, every city and town in America, you wouldn't be able to experiment with these things because it would be one size fits all government. Everybody has to do this. Okay, so states become very instrumental in coming up with solutions to problems. States and local governments. That's why they call them laboratories of democracy. So if you do away with federalism and the federal government makes all these decisions, you don't have this. Another good example of this is the Welfare Reform Act that we talked about. Talked about 2 governors, the governor of Wisconsin, the governor of Michigan. came up with new plans to deal with welfare. Other states adopted these because they were able to experiment. Okay. You should be able to write about that just a little bit. Okay. All right. Can anybody in here define federalism for me? We've only been talking about it for a month. The sharing or division of powers. The sharing or division of powers between national, state, and local governments. Now, a couple of you, that was number 5 on, or your 5th paragraph on the essay, and a couple of you had those words in it, but it was only a couple of them. Sharing or division of powers between national, state, and local governments. The elastic clause, again, the necessary and proper clause, stretches the power of the national government. Let me give you an example. Okay, this clause is in the Constitution. It's always been in the Constitution. It was never really used. You guys know what commerce is when you do business, okay, across state lines. It was never really used for the government to regulate commerce. Now, you cannot tax, the Constitution says you cannot tax one vessel from one state to another. So if a trucker crosses from Missouri into Kansas, you can't tax that trucker. Those goods coming across. Does that make sense? Okay. However, if you're building a house in Kansas, you're a home builder, okay? First of all, you're going to want to dig a hole in the ground for the basement. Yes, the foundation. You need a strong foundation. So you dig a hole. Now, the machine that's used to dig that hole, what's that machine called? Excavator. You know, the big thing with the hook that comes in and scoops the dirt out. Was that excavator made in Kansas? No, we don't build those here. So that excavator came across state lines. It's being used in commerce. So the federal government can now regulate the use of excavators. Then you got to pour concrete in that hole. Right now, can you find all the products or all the materials to make concrete in Kansas, or do you have to import any of them? What do you need to make concrete? Sand, water, and like gravel. Yeah, we have all that in Kansas. So you can't, the federal government can't regulate concrete, or can they? What about the equipment to mix the concrete? Is that made in Kansas? Now, if you're doing it by hand, there's no interstate commerce. Okay. What about the, the truck, the concrete truck, with the spinning thing? That wasn't made in Kansas. The federal government can do it. Then you're going to put up the walls of the house. You're going to frame it up. Now, do you get all the lumber, frame up houses in Kansas? Heck no. We don't even have any trees. Okay? You guys know where we get most of our lumber for framing houses? You guys know where that comes from? Canada. Okay, is that going to cross several state lines to get to Kansas? You bet. So basically, guys, because of the Interstate Commerce Clause, the entire home building industry is regulated by the federal government. Some of you guys, any of you guys take Trade Academy? You're familiar with OSHA. You had to learn about the occupational safety hazard thing, right? Where the federal government comes in and makes sure that all these job sites are safe. Okay, it's all through the Interstate Commerce Clause. It was never really used, but this really stretches the authority of the government. So there are literally tens of thousands of regulations on businesses in this country, which shows the stretching of authority. Okay, so Congress can do all things necessary and proper to carry out the law, which gives the federal government a whole lot more power than it ever had, or that it was given in the Constitution. Well, they call it the elastic. Stretches their power. Everybody good on that? Good story? Maybe, maybe not. I'm trying. Okay. And then the role of federal courts, again, guys, is to play referee, umpire, settle disputes within our government, between states, between individuals. That's the role of the federal courts. And you guys know about judicial review, where the Supreme Court can rule whether actions of the executive or laws of the legislature are valid or invalid. Okay, that kind of wraps up the review. I'm going to stop this.